Hi guys, hi, hello. So we're going to be moving on in our Unit 4 stuff. Yesterday we talked about JFK, our president who is going to be in charge for a chunk of our civil rights movement as it starts to kind of heat up. The things that we talk about today are going to kind of overlap with what was happening with that transition of power, as well as seeing how our different groups that we learned about last week, what kinds of methods they're going to take to try and get their point across and see change start to happen. Last week, we talked about one style of protest, which is boycotting, an economic approach to getting a message out there and making change happen. We're going to talk about a couple of other methods that they're going to try out again over the course of the next couple of days so that you guys understand that it's more than just telling someone that you want to see change. There's an active way to participate in this process. After we talk about a little bit of those different methods, we're going to end the day with work to be completed. You'll have a new assignment that you're going to be looking at. Again, something that's new but old. It's a skill that you guys have utilized before. It's obviously a little different in a virtual realm though. So with that said and done, we're going to grab out your notebooks and just keep on talking here with Unit 4, our civil rights movement, and we're going to talk about demonstrating for freedom. So, one of the groups that we first, again, were introduced to is the SNCC, or the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee. Remembering that they're an offshoot of the SCLC, or the Southern Christian. I'm going to say that backwards now. Yep. Well, it's out of my head right now, so we're just going to keep on moving here. You have it in your notes. The SCLC is the group that Martin Luther King Jr. Helped to lead with this process, with the boycott. And of course, there's a lot of speech giving. Sermons that are being delivered throughout. Of course, the Southern Christian approach to it is, of course, rooted in the African American church. SNCC, on the other hand, not satisfied with just doing marches and, again, putting out together speeches and things like that. So seeing this process overall. So what SNCC is going to utilize is actually a protest method that has happened before, and it's referred to as a sit-in. A sit-in is very straightforward, going to a place and refusing to leave until the injustice is addressed. This was a style or approach that CORE, again, a group that we talked about in Unit 2 at one point, that they utilized during the 1940s to try and express their displeasure with the discrimination against African Americans at the time. And the thing about this particular protest style is that, like many of the other ones, it's a very public display. Again, the giving of a speech is something that, again, is not something that's going to reach everyone all the time, but staging a sit-in is very disruptive, and it's something that draws a lot of attention really fast. And something I'm going to talk about repeatedly about why is it that this civil rights movement picks up as much as it does? Why is it this moment in history where this all starts to happen? Has a lot to do with the fact that we're living in a very new age in American experience, where television and live news reporting is going to make it a lot harder to ignore what's happening in the country and these protests, as they are, again, young people standing up for themselves and being met with extreme violence in a lot of cases. The TV and TV reporting allows the nation to see the faces of racism. It's much harder to ignore when you can look and see, oh, that person hit a child because they're sitting at a lunch counter. And it makes the whole idea of being able to be like, well, that's just the way it is. That excuse doesn't seem to sit as well as the time goes on. And sit-ins and those who participate in sit-ins have to endure a lot to be able to successfully complete them. Again, people who participate in sit-ins can be arrested, they could be beaten. These are students, they could be suspended from college, they could get tear gas, they could get blasted with fire hoses. All of these are reactions that people had to these sit ins, and all of them are very intense, of course. If As more and more people start to see kind of what is happening here and start to form strong opinions about what they feel, aka they decide, oh, I'm going to join now, which happened a lot in the early days of this movement. New members would be given specific training on how to act during a sit in, how to behave, and how to endure all of the craziness that's going to come at them. Some famous examples of sit-ins from the civil rights movement, plus, but both before and after World War II. The first is the one that CORE did in Chicago. They had members sit at segregated lunch counters and they refused to leave until they'd be served food. Another one that's a bit more rooted in SNCC and their approach is the one that happens in Greensboro, North Carolina. Students from a local college decide that they want to go to a whites only lunch counter at Woolworth's store, which is a famous chain at that time, and they refuse to leave until they can all sit there and be served. As I said, the reactions from people who don't want to see change are all extreme, again, or at least they're just trying their best to stop this. And this is disruptive. This is something that really is a lot. So it could be anything from calling the police to harassing the protesters. It could be raising the price of food so that even if they were going to sit there, they can't have the money, they can't sit there. They would physically remove counter seats to avoid having these sit ins take place. So many different things. In the end, through this process and through this commitment that a lot of these groups had, desegregation of lunch counters happens in 48 cities across 11 different states by the late 1960, by the end of 1960, which is a huge, huge win. Even though it might feel kind of small, it's a big step in the right direction. This right here is an image that, if we were in class together, would be something that I'd love to be able to do with you. But I used to do living pictures with this particular moment in history. This is a picture of members of SNCC actually training on how to endure a sit-in when the people around them obviously want them to leave. So you can see here that those again young people sitting at the counter are putting up with a lot of harassment, but they're refusing to go. So, switching tactics, we're seeing here that a lot of again changes are happening in our country throughout the late 50s into the 60s, but well, again, it just because a law is changing or there is some kind of agreed movement to go forward doesn't mean it's actually changing. This is an important idea to kind of keep in the back of your head as we talk about these major decisions and these major laws that take place in our country during this time, is that just because a law changes doesn't mean people are going to change. That's a huge concept to keep in mind. In 1961, so after JFK is taking control of the White House, CORE, another of our groups out there, is going to organize a bus trip to test out a new decision from the Supreme Court that all public busing must be integrated. The NAACP, our legal approach to this process, they had a successful lawsuit against, again, the nation, basically saying that they have to allow for integrated busing. In 61, they're going to test out this decision to see if it actually is going to work. So what they do is they ask for people who want to go. So they have both white and black activists. They get nicknamed Freedom Riders. So this protest, because that's really what this is, it's a demonstration to see if this change is actually going into effect. The goal of this particular demonstration is to bring attention to the fact that there is no enforcement happening behind this decision, that just because they say it doesn't mean it's happening. So the way that this plays out is dramatic, to say the least. So the first bus that they attempt to get on and to ride to showcase this process is these people aren't even going to make it on the bus. They'll be attacked by a mob with chains and brass knuckles and pistols and just basically any kind of weapon they can come, because they aren't successful in getting onto that first bus. They try again. This time they actually make it on the bus, but as they're pulling away, this angry mob is going to blow out the tire, so they have to stop, and then they throw a bomb into the bus through a back window. Everyone escapes eventually, but it's a very harrowing experience. But all of these, again, particular attacks are well covered in the news. That's one of the reasons that the people knew that Core was going to try this out and met them at that first bus, is that they were very public about it, that this is what they were going to try and do. So third bus, right? By the time we get to this third attempt to test this law, there's a total new group of people, again, to kind of pick up where they left off. When they arrive to load the bus, the driver recognizes them and is like, nope, I'm definitely not going to drive this because of the craziness that happened beforehand. Um, in the end, though, the federal government is going to step in and actually push this a little bit. Robert F. Kennedy, who is obviously John F. Kennedy's younger brother, he's also the attorney general at the time, is going to intervene. When this group arrives, they're going to be met with another mob who is going to beat them and try and stop them. The difference here is that a Justice Department, someone who works for the federal government, was actually there and witnessed the whole thing. As he relays this information back to Washington, it is a moment where JFK has to step in. He vows to provide protection to the remaining freedom riders and to help enforce desegregation. And these laws are great and these changes and decisions are awesome, but if you can't enforce them, it's like nothing has changed. So it's a big challenge of this time period, is figuring out how do you create meaningful legislation and as well protect the people who are going to try and take advantage of it. When it comes right down to it, over the course of the next few years, these different decisions that keep coming down the pike from the Supreme Court, with the NAACP working tirelessly to try and get more and more changes met, we're going to see that it requires a lot of resilience, and this group is not going away. It doesn't happen fast, and it definitely doesn't, again, just disappear after they make one win. There's too much to be changed here. So a lot of the stuff I'm going to talk about on this slide is about standing firm and staying committed. So we're going to see here that in 62, an interesting case plays down, which has to do with integration of a state university, the University of Mississippi, or Ole Miss. James Meredith, who was a veteran from, again, one of our wars before this, wanted to go to college. He was guaranteed through the GI Bill that he was going to be able to go, but Ole Miss was a all-white college when he first applied, and he is going to take them to court, and the federal court are going to decide that they have to let him in. He's very qualified. He definitely would have made the requirements anyways. When he showed up to register for his classes, as he used to have to do back in the day, thousands of white rioters were there within this riot to try and stop him from just attending college. Two people will die and 200 more people are going to be arrested because this is once again another very public demonstration of them testing out the decision here. JFK is going to assign federal marshals to escort James to class, to guard his parents at home, because the violence and reaction is so intense. As this is going on, we're going to see that MLK and the SCLC, they are moving from Montgomery to other places in Alabama, trying to, again, keep drawing attention to where the discrimination is the most intense. And Birmingham, Alabama is going to be the next location where protests and demonstrations are going to go down, organized by MLK and the SCLC, with, again, Reverend Fred Shuttlesworth is going to be kind of the point man in Birmingham as well. And this place right here in Birmingham was one of the most strictly segregated in all of the South. This is very much a place where racial violence and lynchings happened way, way often. And what they decide to do in Birmingham is to bring again, focus basically to this whole process of, again, discrimination is to organize a march. Again, this is another demonstration, nonviolent, to bring attention. It's disruptive, different things like that. And they're going to march through the city. A lot of people will be arrested, including Martin Luther King Jr., who's going to be put into the Birmingham jail. Your activity that you guys are going to be required to do is going to have to do with this particular piece right here. Over 1,000 different people are going to get arrested in this march alone. And what happens after MLK is arrested in Birmingham is both very sweet and very horrific. So on May 3rd, 1963, after MLK and the original march took place, about 1,000 African American children, ranging from lots of different ages, but all kids, are going to stage their own march. It's nicknamed the Children's Crusade, and they're all looking up to MLK and the SCLC and wanting to be like them. And what ends up happening is really terrible. These kids, as they march through the streets, are going to meet a helmeted police force who are prepared to stop this march at any cost. And they're going to utilize really brutal tactics to stop these children, again, using high pressure fire hoses. If you can just think about that in your own head, how terrifyingly painful that would be, to be blasted with a hose that's meant to put out fires. They use attack dogs. Again, they beat these children on the street. It's all so horrific and violent. And the thing about it is that this particular march is another incident which is very public. The TV stations had arrived because of MLK and his arrest, and they were there. And not only now are we seeing pictures of these different things, again, pictures of the sit-ins and the harassment, or pictures of grown men fighting in the streets and being hit, but you're seeing and hearing these children as live coverage is happening of this Children's Crusade March. And they have kids screaming because they're being hit with fire hoses or attacked by dogs. And it changes a lot of people's stance on this process. Some become, again, more, I guess, firmly on the side of staying out of it, or they, again, find ways to explain why this violence is necessary. And then others are going to be inspired to join and inspired to put more effort into changing their own lives to make this all go away. Again, it's a lot. It's a lot of violence in this time period. The 1960s and 70s are a very intense time in the United States, and it's hard to sit back and ignore what's going on around you. It's a huge change for our country, that's for sure. So that's it for notes. You guys can put your notebooks away. Last thing is going to be work to be completed. So just keep checking Classroom. You're going to have stuff every single day that I've got posted, whether it's lectures or reminders or whatever. Again, by the end of today, you need to make sure that you hit submit on your Montgomery bus boycott. Again, we're considering why was the boycott so successful when other protests might not have been. And that you have something new, which directions are on Classroom for you to see. It's going to be an active reading activity. See, I've got that on there twice, which is kind of funny. You're going to be editing your own copy by commenting on it. So highlighting, commenting items, putting little summaries after bits and pieces. You'll see it's pretty straightforward. You have until the end of Thursday to get that finished up for me. Just a reminder, end of unit is going to be Wednesday the 8th, and you've got your interview due for me after spring break. Again, your audio, which can be submitted to me with an email or through Drive or wherever you need to, and then your final draft of questions also needs to be submitted as well. I hope you guys all have a great day, and make sure you're emailing me with questions.